Greetings, Mr. PMC. Come on in, please ensure that your weapons stay holstered. Nice of you to join us for the second installment of the Tarkov Consultant. There's still some space in the back, so take a seat. My lovely research assistant has already loaded in all the slides. Let us begin. The topic today is map-to-map travel. I know it is not a big and vital issue, as is the economy from the previous talk. It's also a new feature that will require resources to develop. So why should we invest time to look into the detail of such a putative mechanic? In late May of this year, Nikita posted a screenshot supposedly showing map-to-map travel. Multiple prominent content creators took up that post and speculated on the implementation. That ranged from anywhere on an event feature that would get incorporated into the next patch, to a move towards a full open world where players could seamlessly travel between interconnected maps. The most frequently proposed hypothesis was speculation about a marathon event that would see players travel through many, if not all of the maps in a specified sequence. Now if you look closely at this screenshot, experienced players can place this on the map Streets of Tarkov, on Klimov Street, south of the Expo building. Therefore it makes no sense to showcase map-to-map travel with an example of travel from Streets of Tarkov to Streets of Tarkov. To me, this points of this being an old screenshot from a time before the PTR that allows players to travel from one part of the map to another. Nevertheless, those rumors might point towards BSG actually working on a map-to-map travel feature. For me, it's a really interesting feature that could provide tangible improvement to Escape from Tarkov. Not only would it improve the immersion into the world of Tarkov, but it would also allow for more interesting mission design and can even solve some gameplay issues. In addition, it seems better to present a sensible model for BSG to be inspired by than to critique a model once it is set. To pique BSG's interest, here's a little spoiler. The proposed model would even save them some money. However, we need to be clear that just adding map-to-map travel won't change the game much for the better. Chances are that it becomes a dead feature that is barely used outside of specific quests that force its use. To make the most out of this new feature, the surrounding systems of the game need to work with the mechanic, so that it becomes a viable option in the player's toolkit. Let us first take a look at the potential pitfalls that could make a poorly implemented map-to-map travel fail, so that steps can be taken to avoid them. I have laid out the design goals that I want the game to strive for in the introduction to the video on the economy. If you want to check those out, there should be a link to that video in the top right corner right at this moment. The first and most obvious problem is that just adding the option to move to another map instead of your hideout after extracting will not be used unless the player is directly forced. If given a choice between loading into a new map and stopping by your hideout to drop loot, to restock on ammo and medical supplies, to repair damaged armor and to refill on food and water, the sensible choice is always to make a stop by the hideout. You can load into the map of your choice anyhow, so why not take the pit stop? Going into a raid ill-prepared is a recipe to get killed. So we need to have an incentive to use map-to-map travel. However, we also need to keep in mind that raids are already a significant time investment. If you have less than 45 minutes of uninterrupted time, playing Tarkov is very tricky. Map-to-map travel can significantly raise that lower limit, as you need to traverse potentially multiple maps to get you to your actual destination. This makes it harder for casual players to find time to play, further restricting the EFT player pool. It will also make death more punishing, as you have invested more time playing that raid before being sent back to your hideout with nothing to show for it. This is especially true for teams. The death of a single team member is already very disruptive for a group, as the survivor needs to make the call whether to abort and extract, or go through with their plans while their teammate does something else. Frequently it takes 15 minutes or more until the remainder of the group can disentangle themselves from the situation or sort out the aftermath of a fight, and then make their way to the extract. Now with map-to-map travel, a single death would potentially leave the survivor with a choice to abort and write off the significant travel time, or to continue with the raid, meaning that the dead group member won't be able to rejoin for another 30 minutes or more. A successful concept for map-to-map travel need to be cognizant of all of these issues and take measures to solve or at least mitigate them. One possible solution to all these issues would be to differentiate the infiltration. I propose to allow the players to reach the map of his choice in one of three ways, each coming with their own advantages and disadvantages. The most basic option would be to have our PMC travel to the raid location on foot. The player selects a map and joins the queue for the raid on that map. Since careful walking obviously takes quite a while, the player would join the raid after it has already begun or unfolded, at a time where usually player scavs join in. This would be sufficient for many quests, though prime loot might already have been taken and the best spots cleared. How late into the raid the player joins would depend on the distance between the hideout location and the map itself. Instead of having our PMC travel off-screen, we could also employ map-to-map travel to reach our destination. For that, we would start in one of the maps adjacent to our hideout and then move to an extract dedicated to the transfer to a specific map. Those extraction points would be either created from scratch or converted from an existing extract. When you leave the map through a transit extract, you don't go back to your hideout. You skip the post-raid screens and go directly to the game lobby for the next raid. If you load in, your starting location will be one of those spawns close to where you came from, and you will spawn into the raid at its start. This way, all the loot is available and you roughly know which player spawn point you enter the map. This allows you to plan your approach. Take Lighthouse for example. If you want to visit Lightkeeper, move from Tunnel to get one of the southern spawns. If you need to visit Water Treatment Plant, move in from Path to Lighthouse to get a northern spawn. I would like to stress the part where you go into a special lobby after exfiltrating through a transit extract. Here you only have the options to start the raid or leave the game. This allows you to call it a day in case you run out of gaming time. The next time you join, just like upon disconnect, you can only get back into that specific lobby in order to resume your game. That brief stop in the lobby also allows you to link up with group members and maybe even invite group members. So if your buddy has fallen in the previous raid, or had been offline when you started playing, he can join your raid. The final option is to charter a ride for your PMC. As a player, you select your map, check the taxi box, fork over cash, and load into the raid. Your PMC will spawn at the start of the raid like you would in the current 0.14 patch. Now that feed would need to be finely tuned. It needs to be substantial enough that you need to be extremely successful in order to use this option constantly. This is where the system touches our previous topic of the economy. I would suggest 80,000 to 150,000 rubles as a starting point. Reduction of this fee could be part of quest reward packages, allowing a player to plan the progression to gain premium access to his favorite map for cheap or even free. Now I have to confess that I had an ulterior motive when choosing raid time as the motivating factor for map-to-map travel. If implemented this way, it could be used to actively manage a raid. What do I mean by active raid management? I guess we have to go for a quick tangent. I've taken the time to look through my replays and plot the raid times. You can see the results in the graph on the right. As you can see, half of my raids are done before the 18-minute mark, with a 56% survival rate. Now I'm a fairly cautious player and often avoid combat if I don't have an advantageous position. I'm also not opposed to staying on the map until the end, especially on streets, which leads to about 5% of my raids extending beyond the 40-minute mark. You see the drop at the 8-minute mark from a series of raids where I just needed to survive and extract a polish of a weekly quest, so I extracted after 7 minutes. Despite of these caveats, I think it's still fair to assume that this is rather on the conservative side of the distribution, and that the survival curve of most players will look similar or even have a more aggressive deterioration. Yet it means that at 18 minutes, about half of PMCs have either been killed or left the map. After roughly 25 minutes, 80% of PMCs that started the raid are gone. This will of course heavily depend on the map and how many squads are in the raid, but it's a reasonable assumption. This allows for what I call the lazy method of questing, where you seek out a rarely trafficked place on the map and hide in a random loot-free room or a random bush. You set the timer for 25 to 35 minutes, depending on how much time you need for the quest, and then go and do some chores or watch a YouTube video. If you're feeling crazy, you can even give your kids some FaceTime and do some parenting. Timer goes off and you return to the game with 10 minutes left on the clock, or something thereabout, and you just do your quest without many interference from other PMCs. On the flip side, if you have a quest that requires you to kill PMCs, your best bet is to hunt off spawn, and if you haven't seen people within the first 20 minutes, you should probably reset. Now, does this break the game? Not really, but it's not good game design. Tarkov lives from the thrill of never being safe and PMCs lurking potentially at every location. With the infiltration scheme I've laid out above, we could alleviate this problem. Since we have plenty of players taking the cheap tour towards the destination, we can replace the PMCs that have fallen in the initial skirmishes, as well as those that have extracted after 15 minutes. If we allow for map-to-map traveling PMCs to be able to spawn in 5 to 10 minutes after the raid has started, they fill up the losses from the skirmishes of spawn and those who have extracted very early. It's hard to say how many players would choose which method of infiltration, but a good target would be that half of the time map-to-map travel would result in a spawn with a raid start, and the other half would be those very early spawns after 5 to 10 minutes. As losses mount, the walk-ins would arrive that chose to infiltrate without spending either money or the time to get to the map at the start of the raid. After 25 minutes, the player scarce would now finally spawn in. Active raid management should also involve monitoring the numbers of PMCs in the later stage of the raid. If too few PMCs are around, groups of 2 to 3 raiders or even a 4-man Bloodhound squad could join. Those AR groups would path from one end of the map to the other, making late stages of the raid a bit more challenging for player scavs and PMC stragglers alike. Apart from keeping raids interesting for longer, such a system would have a cost benefit for BSG. Since we are servicing more players with a single raid instance, we need fewer active raids for a given number of people. Fewer raids translates into less server resources that are required. Active raid management is not only good for gameplay, but also for the bottom line. After changing infiltration, it just makes sense to also adjust the exfiltration system to accommodate the new mechanic. Currently in the game, all extracts lead back to the hideout. The system seems pretty straightforward. However, once we take a closer look at the existing extraction zones, there are many different types. Some are available only to specific spawn locations, think outskirts versus you in roadblock and woods, while others are available even if you spawn right next to them, think path to lighthouse or cliff descent. Some just require you to reach the extract, while others may require certain gear or a key or money to use. Most extracts are present each game, while others, like Old Gas Station or Courtyard, are opened or closed at random at the start of the raid. This is already a mess, even before we start adding transits for extracts. For sensible map-to-map travel, all transit extracts need to be open every raid and to every player. It would really suck to map out a travel route only to discover that you cannot go to the map you want to do a quest on because you've spawned close to that border and you don't have the required transit extract active. Thus, transit extracts need to be open every raid for every player. However, extracts that are always open for all players allow for quick resets in case of a bad spawn. I'm looking at you, Southern Road, causing the number of players in a raid to drop even faster. One solution to this problem are dynamic extracts that open after a given time. Imagine you're spawning on the east side of Shoreline. Currently, this would allow you to extract a tunnel and at path to lighthouse, while not allowing you to extract at road to customs and railway bridge. Using dynamic extracts, you could extract at all 4 of those locations. But for you, path to lighthouse and tunnel would open after 10 minutes, while road to customs and railway bridge would open 3 minutes before the raid ends. If you had spawned in next to path to lighthouse extract, then you'd have road to customs and railway bridge open after 10 minutes, while tunnel and path to lighthouse would open 3 minutes before the raid ends. Such time gates remove the option to instantly reset, thus keeping the PMC number higher in the raid, while also solving the issue of accidental run-throughs where you finally found that vertex you were looking for, only to discover that the raid only lasted 5 minutes and so it doesn't count for the quest. With that problem solved, transit extracts could open 10 minutes after spawn to reflect the fact that you're not extracting to safety, but that you're continuing on your raid. With dynamic extracts, we could adjust the random extracts like gas stations or courtyard to be open each raid, but only for a portion of time. Instead of allowing instant resets through courtyard when open, such random extracts would open at a random point in the time, past 7 minutes, and then stay open for a random time between 10 and 30 minutes. PMCs coming early could receive a timer when the extract will open, while PMCs coming late could see red smoke instead of green. Why make this change? There are enough quests that require you to extract through a random extract location, and it is simply better game design to give the player the option each raid than to force them to reset over and over until they get lucky. And yes, I have the same frustration with Boss Hunt. Finally, taxi could be changed in a similar way. Instead of just not being there, why not set a random timer until the taxi arrives, by simply playing the departure animation in reverse. Once the taxi is taken, it drives off and returns 10 to 15 minutes later. How would that adjustment work in practice? Let's take a look at the map of Reserve made by Reamer. Reserve is a rather rich map that suffers from atrocious extracts before the player acquires the Red Rebel ice pick. Manhole means no backpack, armored train is super awkward, bunker hermetic door alerts the entire map, and D2 is legendary for its rats. Map-to-map travel would give the player the option to transit to another map using a more secure transit extract. Is it worth trading the risk of facing the D2 tunnels for the risk of traversing customs or woods? That's for each player to decide, but it allows newer players to get used to Reserve without Red Rebel. I'm keeping it shorter for today. There is still a lot of room for discussion around the margins, like wipe pacing through handing out infiltration options as quest rewards or similar topics. This short exposé has hopefully convinced you that map-to-map travel is a mechanic with a lot of potential to improve Tarkov if implemented properly. To realize that potential, there needs to be an intrinsic incentive for the players to use this mechanic. At the same time, issues around raid duration and team play need to be addressed. I propose to implement the option of having players start at later points into an already ongoing raid as incentive that works well with the current raid-based game loop. Such an implementation would also allow for a more active raid management, with the game keeping the number of PMCs higher for longer into the raid, to keep up the tension and to incentivize players that seek PvP combat to stay in the raid for longer. In order to make map-to-map travel a success, the surrounding game mechanics, first and foremost the infiltration and exfiltration systems, need to be looked at. This can provide additional gameplay improvements with a focus on raid planning and in-raid player decisions, as well as player progression. And with that, I'm once again left thanking you for listening. The verdict is still out there if these videos are an exercise in futility, quickly forgotten in the vast sea of YouTube content, or if they provide an audience with food for thought. This video has been put together more quickly, since rumors are that BSG is working on map-to-map travel right now. If you found this contribution helpful, I'd be grateful for a like and/or comment. It helps with the algorithm. That's it from me, and I wish you all the best in your raids. Until next time.